So this video is kind of a second part to a piece I did over on my friend Rowan's channel. You should definitely go watch that video before you watch this one. I will wait for you to come back. The link is in the description. Okay, are you back? Good. Now, if you want a quick recap, I was basically talking about the Young Avengers and why I think they're really, really good LGBT representation. And at the start of this video, I'm going to be getting into some of the criticisms that people had of the Young Avengers representation. This was all filmed on a different day, so don't be shocked when I change clothes. Now, I've heard some people say that they disagree, that this isn't good representation, that there's some queer baiting going on, and some of the characters are queer on paper, but not in practice. But I disagree with that disagreement, and it comfortably brings me onto my next point. Like I said, some people take issue with some of these characters being described as not fully straight, but not exhibiting any traits that really show that. I don't think that's a weakness though, I think it's a strength. Now if this was something like Star-Lord or Valkyrie in the MCU, then I'd probably agree with you. When your only queer representation pretty much exclusively presents as straight, then that's a problem. Additionally, when all you've got is straight characters and you hint that someone's heterosexuality might be flexible, but you don't pay off that hint, you're making a misstep. I think that this mindset, the idea that anything other than overt queerness equals bad representation, comes from the low bar that's set by mainstream media. Now, it is usually accurate, but you can't forget that these people do exist. Pansexual men who have a strong preference for women, or straight women who, you know, check out a girl every now and then. Just showing these experiences isn't inherently bad. What is bad is only showing those experiences to pay lip service to the gays whilst not offending the homophobes. But Young Avengers isn't paying lip service. They're not holding back. They're not queer baiting. They're not really short of their LGBs or Qs. It means they can represent those experiences and validate them without leaving so many other members of the community hanging. Having Kate maybe be a little bit heteroflexible is fun. It's a bit of light teasing instead of just a scrap thrown at the gays to shut them up for a while. This really is a core strength of the Young Avengers. They have so many queer characters, the writer can have his cake and eat it too. And the thing is, it's so obvious. When you move from tokenism to actual diversity, you can explore more aspects of different identities more deeply than you could do otherwise. You also make your life just a little bit easier because there's less weight on each character's shoulders. You don't have one gay dude bearing the responsibility of representing every single queer identity. You can lean into some stereotypes. You can kill your gays without killing all your gays. You can have them be mischievous and flirty, or single and pining, or scared to come out, or a little bit confused, or anything. You can have your characters just be themselves without worrying about how it will reflect on the community that they're supposed to represent. And a brilliant example of why this is actually really important comes from the initial 2005 run. See, Patriot was the only member of the team that wasn't white, apart from Hulkling, but he was green, so I don't really think that one counts. Specifically though, Patriot was black, the grandson of the first black Captain America in fact. But not only was he the only black person on the team, he was the only member of the team to have a problem with drugs. And if you read the letters sent in by fans, you can see that they had a problem with that. And it's understandable why. The only character to have a drug problem is the lone black character. Okay, sure, it made sense for the story, and the writer didn't intend for it to reflect on black people as a whole, but that's how it was read. And you can't expect people not to do that when they're so starved for representation. It's really difficult to see the only character that you can identify with fall into the stereotypes associated with your identity. By limiting diversity, you limit the stories that you can tell. If you only have one black character, for example, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. You can either make them perfect, a shining example of a person that falls into absolutely no stereotypes, or you can play into some of those stereotypes and hurt and offend your audience. Some fans suggested that the drug problem should have been left to another white character, but I disagree. You can't have all the spice and drama and flaws be for your white characters because it just leaves your black characters as uninteresting props. No, if there was even one other member of the team that was black, this wouldn't be a problem. The solution isn't to take stories away from those minority groups, it's to add more of them in. No group is a monolith. Just one character is never going to be enough. Similarly, you might take issue with Prodigy's bisexuality being down to his mutant ability, or with Marvel Boy's pansexuality being explained by his being an alien. And normally these sci-fi explanations are needless and potentially dismissive of the validity of LGBTQ identities. But they're not in this case, because you've got them stood alongside people that are bisexual just because that's what they are, for the more grounded reasons. In this case, it's pretty cool. In fact, it's a good example of something else that Young Avengers allows for, the mixing of metaphor with explicit depictions. By now you're definitely aware that superheroes have been used as allegories for oppressed groups. Superman is Jewish, the X-Men are gay, and Batman and Iron Man are the most oppressed group of all. Sad white billionaires. Seriously though, there's a long history of using metaphors to tell stories that might not have been palatable to certain audiences or simply would not have been allowed in comics at the time. Don't get me wrong, I love a good allegory, but at some point we gotta stop using animals to talk about sexism and racism. and actually talk about those things. The use of superheroes as stand-ins for the LGBTQ community is definitely powerful. I don't disagree with that. But you don't want to pull on that thread. Take the X-Men, for example. You see, the thing is that mutants are actually biologically different from humans. They have the mutant X gene, which is what gives them their mutations. And they also present a much higher risk of being a danger to themselves or others thanks to those mutations. And you can't sit there and tell me that being scared of someone who can control the minds of others, cause an ice age, or literally rearrange reality with a thought is the same as being uncomfortable around a lesbian. Metaphors are great, but they can only take you so far. That is the beauty of Young Avengers though. It can draw parallels between the experiences of superpowered individuals and queer teenagers, all within a single character. Take Billy's coming out story, for example. The group were struggling to come out as superheroes to their parents, and Billy accidentally came out as gay instead. This shared language between the superhero and queer experience doesn't feel like it's appropriation because those using it are gay themselves. It's being recontextualized in a way that allows for us to have these characters be openly queer without falling into the trope of gay hardship. And also still giving us a tense coming out story. Using the history of metaphors that are baked into the superhero comic genre alongside clear depictions of minority identities really is a strength of the Young Avengers runs. It crops up in both Gillen and Heinberg's writings, and honestly I think it serves to make the Marvel universe just more believable. And this all really resonated with fans. The last page of a comic book is often left as a space for letters, and there are so many messages from readers who were touched by Heinberg and Gillen's handling of these characters and topics. It is such a heartwarming experience to read the words of queer people who were so positively affected by these comics, printed in the comics themselves. And that's pretty much all I've got to say on this, but the last question you might be asking is why? More specifically, why, if these came out in 2005 and 2013, have we not seen this kind of representation in the MCU? Or in any non-MCU film or TV show for that matter? A simple answer is that comics are a pretty open place. According to Alan Heinberg, you can largely do what you want. In a 2011 interview, he claimed that the lack of representation in comics was more down to writers just not being interested in writing those stories, rather than editors putting blocks on them. That's not quite the whole picture though. One of the main reasons that the editors at Marvel Comics are way more lax than their film counterparts is because the costs and commitments of producing a comic are way less than that of making a film or TV show. It means you can take much larger strides with a far smaller monetary risk. If readers don't like a character, you can just replace them without having to worry about actors' contracts or expensive reshoots. If people don't like a plot point, you can just retcon it by having Spider-Man sell his marriage to the devil. It doesn't matter. It's comics. However, this does mean that there are great proving ground for diversity. In fact, Marvel tend to use well-performing characters and stories from the comics to inform what they might plan for the future of the movie. Falcon becoming Captain America happened in the comics in 2015, and Natalie Portman might be suiting up as Thor in Love and Thunder because that's what happened to her character in the comics. If you want to know what Marvel's roadmap is for characters in the films, all you need to do is have a peek at the comics and just see who they're really pushing, because chances are they're going to be important in the films down the line. It is painfully slow going, but the MCU does now seem to be making those steps towards diversity that the comics did over a decade ago, now that they know it'll make them money. Overall, what I'm saying is that the Young Avengers comics are a great example of where diversity and representation in the media should be headed. And if hearing me ramble on about this has you even remotely interested, I implore you to read the comics. But don't fret, if that's not your style, I can guarantee you they're going to be coming in the MCU at some point in the future. We've already seen my favourite gay son Billy and my best bisexual boy Tommy show up in WandaVision, but a bunch of other Young Avengers characters either have already shown up in the MCU or are getting their own TV shows. Whew. And that was the video. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you to my patrons, with a very special thank you to Sarah. And also don't forget to go and check out Rowan's channel because she does a lot of good videos, like all the time. She is one of my favourite channels. Go and check her out. Follow me on Twitter, my podcast, all of that. You know, it's all in the description. You can go check all that out. It's down there. I'll be back with a video at some point in the future, maybe. I don't know. Goodbye.